Hello everybody and welcome to another UFC breakdown video where we will be taking a deep dive into 6 of the most interesting fights taking place this weekend at UFC on ESPN plus 27 as we gear up to crown a new king of the flyweight division. So shout out to everyone that is watching this video. I really appreciate you. I hope you're having the most awesome fucking Thursday ever, and hopefully if you're watching this in work, do you know what I mean, if you're driving around on your way into work, whatever you're doing, hopefully this video or this podcast is gonna brighten up your day a little bit. Hopefully you enjoy this one. It should be a good one, and fingers crossed we can help you make some money this weekend. And as ever, boys, remember, this weekend, if you would like one of those live streams where we dig for fun bets, lottery ticket parlays, prop bets for every single fight taking place this weekend, hit the like button. I know you will. You always fucking do. You're a good bunch, man. Hit the like button below. If this video gets 300 likes, I will do that live stream a few hours before this event takes place, where we try and find all those crazy prop bets, the lottery ticket parlays. We have a little bit of fun, man. We take this side of gambling very, very seriously. We take a deep dive into these fights to dig for really good value bets, and then on those live streams on Saturday, that's when we can loosen up and have a little bit of fun. So hit that like button below for me, and also don't forget to leave a comment and let me know what you think of these breakdowns. Let me know if I'm missing anything out. If you disagree with me, let me know what your bets for this weekend are. Even if I don't always have time to respond to every comment, I try and respond to as many as I can, but I can assure you I read every single one of your comments. So now, let's get into the first fight that I want to talk about in today's video, which is going to be Marcin Tybura against Sergey Spivak. And I absolutely love fights like this, because whenever you've got both guys at around even money, you can find decent betting opportunities. Here we see Marcin Tybura around even money, Sergey Spivak in the same ballpark. And I love betting on fights like this, because if you look at both guys around about, odds of 1.91, which is minus 110 for an implied probability of 52%, what, really well-matched fights like this mean is that if you can lean slightly towards, one way or the other, 60-40 in favor of either guy, you could get a really good value bet. So that's why I really love diving into fights like this, because you can often find some really good betting opportunities. And there were 3 names on this card that jumped out at me as good potential bets this weekend. We're going to be talking about all 3 of them in this video, and Marcin Tybura was one of those names. Obviously, going back and watching Sergey Spivak's past fights, I just had this memory of him not being very good. And while I know Marcin Tybura has fallen on hard times, seeing Tybura as an underdog to a guy like Spivak definitely got my spidey senses tingling. But I mean, this can go one of 2 ways, right? Sometimes before I research a card and a name will jump out at me as a potential bet. Sometimes then I'll go and research the fight, I'll watch footage of both guys and I'll be like, after seeing the footage, it makes a lot of sense. I get why the odds are like that. But this is one of those fights where when you watch the footage, my initial suspicion is absolutely confirmed. Like, there's no doubt that Tybura should be the favourite here. I just don't know why the odds are the way they are. I suspect that the odds on this fight have been wiki-capped, and this is something that we see happen a lot in MMA. Many people don't take time to actually study the footage. They just look at win-loss records and base their betting decisions on, the win or loss records of both guys, which can have an influence on the odds. There aren't many sickos out there like me that will spend 2-3 hours researching a fight like this, studying all their past matchups to actually figure out who should be favoured here. And I can tell you the odds are definitely off on this one. I do believe the odds have been influenced by wiki capping, because if you look at Spivak's record, he's 10-1. Plenty of first round finishes. At least on paper, he looks to be quite impressive. And then when you look at Marcin Tybura, he has only won 1 fight in his last 5. But what I would say to people is, if Spivak had fought guys like Sakai, Abdurakhimov, Lewis and Verdum, he would be, you know, 1-4 as well. He probably would have gotten beaten by Stefan Struve as well. So, yes, Tybura's fallen on hard times. Yes, Tybura has a lot of issues that Spivak can potentially exploit, but you can't unfairly judge Tybura in this fight and what he brings to the table as potential threats to Spivak based on a win-loss record that Spivak would also probably have had he fought the same guys as Tybura. And when you look at Spivak's record, it is incredibly padded. I mean, if you look at the guys he's beaten, you know, Tony Lopez has had, you know, 100 fights. You know, he fought Spivak when he was 45 years old. You know, he's beaten guys like Ivo Cook, who is essentially a Croatian football hooligan. He's beaten Travis Fulton, who's had over 300 fights. Luke Morton, this guy in particular, I need to show you. Check out what Luke Morton looks like. This is Spivak fighting Morton. I mean, Morton literally looks like an English football hooligan. He has no business, you know, being a professional fighter. I mean, look at this guy, literally an English football hooligan. So Spivak has built this, you know, impressive record of 10-1, fighting a very, very low level of opponent. And while he is dangerous in some aspects of MMA, there is no doubt in my mind that Tybura should be favoured here, and the odds are heavily influenced by the win-loss records. You know, whenever I see like the odds quite off like this, I always kind of jump onto Twitter to kind of feel out what the sentiment is amongst casual gamblers, to try and figure out exactly why the odds are what they are. And all I can really gather from Sergey Spivak being the favourite here is that people just say Tybura sucks because he's been knocked out a bunch of times over the last few years. That's horseshit to me. At the end of the day, win-loss records don't matter because fights aren't fought on paper, they're fought in an octagon, and ultimately Tybura has got the skills to cause this Spivak dude big problems. So let's talk about this fight from a stylistic point of view. So Tybura definitely has issues. You know, if you look at his record, he's lost 3 of his last 4 fights by knockout. Although the guys he has been knocked out by are a hell of a lot more dangerous than Spivak. The reason why he gets knocked out a lot, and the reason why, to be honest, he gets knocked down, dropped or wobbled in all his fights. I mean, you know, Struve also wobbled him bad in the 3rd round. Reason why he gets rocked a lot is because he's very, very slow and very easy to hit. This guy's striking defense is pretty bad. But despite the fact that he's been knocked out 3 times in his last 4 fights and also rocked bad by Stefan Struve, I wouldn't say this guy has a bad chin. My definition of a bad chin is someone that just gets knocked out cold, right? Tybura isn't like that. If you go back and watch his fight against Derek Lewis, he got dropped bad by Lewis, was able to immediately recover. Watch his fight against Stefan Struve. He ate a vicious front kick to the face, was hurt bad, immediately recovered. You look at his fights against Abdurakhimov and Sakai, he wasn't KO'd with 1 shot. He actually just got rocked, and then Sakai and Abdurakhimov swarmed him, overwhelmed him with volume, and he wasn't able to recover. But if you actually go back and watch both those fights, after initially getting hurt and the TKO finish coming, he immediately woke up and recovered. Against Abdurakhimov in particular, he was sat up against the cage looking frustrated with himself that he got caught. Now, this doesn't excuse the fact that Tybura is at risk of being knocked out in this fight. It absolutely doesn't. But what it does tell you is this is a dude that when he gets hurt, he can take a shot. He will get hit a lot. You know, he elite bombs, but he will try and recover. And he has got a beard on him. He could take a punch. Compare that to Spivak. When Spivak got hurt against Walt Harris, he immediately turtled up and kind of looked for a way out. So, you know, you've got 2 different kinds of guys here. You know, Tybura's got bad striking defense, and so has Spivak. But when Tybura gets hurt, he tries to fight through it. When Spivak gets hurt, he kind of turtles up and quits. In fights like this, you want your money on the guy that is going to fight until his last breath. You know, we use examples of like Jose Aldo against Max Holloway, or Jeremy Stephens against Aldo, Jeremy Stephens against Yair Rodriguez. No matter how badly those guys get hurt, they try to fight through the adversity and come back into the fight. Marcin Tybura tries to do that, whereas Spivak kind of looked for a way out against Walt Harris. But that's just a small detail. From a technical point of view, I would give Spivak a slight advantage standing here, although it is difficult to say. even though I would give Spivak a slight technical advantage, that has to have an asterisk next to it for a few reasons that I'll share with you. So, if you go back and watch Sergey Spivak's fights in WWFC, what you'll see is he throws a lot of straight punches with fast hand speed. Now, these kind of techniques can cause a guy like Tybura a problem, because Tybura fights with his hands low. He's very easy to hit. He tends to get caught a lot. But what is interesting about Tybura is that he's actually got good striking defense while he's focused on defending strikes. His susceptibility to getting caught only creeps in when he attacks his opponent. So what I mean by this is, if you're stood in kickboxing range with him and you attack him, he's actually pretty difficult to hit. He's very good at slipping shots. He's got reasonably good footwork for a heavyweight. However, when he comes forward and attacks his opponent, it's like he can only focus on one thing at a time. So he's only focused on landing a shot and damaging them, which means he's wide open to counters, which means I'm not too concerned for him here, because Spivak is also a guy that only seems to be able to do one thing or another. He only seems to be able to attack with blitzes of these straight fast punches, or when he's backing up and in like a defensive mindset, he's not looking to counter. So even though Tybura is at big risk of being knocked out when he comes forward, I'm not too sure it's going to be too much of an issue here. Of course, it could be Spivak could just see an opening and throw a big counter out there and knock Tybura out. But based on past performances, it's not a huge concern. Now, we said that Spivak will have an advantage when it comes to striking, but have an asterisk next to it, because Spivak could be one of these guys that is a victim of USADA. You know, many guys, when they're coming up on the regional circuit in MMA, you know, there's zero testing for performance-enhancing drugs. And while I don't want to accuse Spivak of anything, now that he's in the UFC, it will probably be the first time that he's experienced stringent drug testing in his career. You know, he won't be able to use, you know, maybe some of the supplements that he used on his way up in WWFC. So I did notice a distinct difference in his performances in WWFC and in his last fight against Tai Tuivasa, where in WWFC he looked very fast, whereas in his last fight against Tuivasa he was very slow and sluggish. And what's also interesting is in WWFC, he was able to exert quite a lot of energy and not slow down, whereas against Tai Tuivasa, he gassed out within 3 minutes. And what I did notice in the Tai Tuivasa fight is when he got tired after 2 or 3 minutes, his striking was completely ineffective, to the point where when he was throwing power strikes, he was kind of throwing like reaching, sloppy, slow arm punches that would not pose Tybura a problem, because even though Tybura is easy to hit, like I said, he could still take a shot. So these kind of shots aren't really going to bother him. So earlier on in the video where I said I do give Spivak the slight striking advantage, but it has an asterisk next to it, that might be because Spivak might only have an advantage standing for the first 2-3 minutes of a fight. And then when he starts to get tired, the skill gap is way closer, and I'd actually say Spivak probably lacks the power after 2 or 3 minutes to actually hurt Tybura. Now, of course, the Tuivasa fight could be an anomaly. You know, maybe he doesn't gas out against Tybura. Maybe he came into that fight injured, or you know, something caused him to have bad cardio. But like I always say with people, we can only make decisions based on the information we have available. Based on the information we have about Spivak's last fight, I mean, his cardio looked god-awful. The only thing that saved him against Tuivasa was that Tuivasa has absolutely no takedown defense. So when Spivak did start to get tired, he could shoot those takedowns to put Tuivasa on his back and alleviate that pressure. If those takedowns hadn't have been there, he would have been in huge trouble against Tuivasa, which brings me on to my next point, the grappling. So we've established Spivak has a slight advantage when it comes to striking, but in terms of grappling, Marcin Tybura is light years ahead of Sergey Spivak. Like, so much better, it is ridiculous. Tybura is a strong wrestler and a decent level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. Sergey Spivak loves to grapple. He's got a base in judo, but he's just very, very green on the ground. Doesn't have a very heavy top game. And you could just tell he doesn't really know what he's doing on the ground yet from an MMA grappling point of view. Now, that's to be expected. Spivak is only 25 years old. he's still got so much to learn, right? He's not going to be the complete article yet. But if this fight goes to the ground, Spivak is in big trouble. And the thing about Spivak is, because he's young and inexperienced, you know, many of his fights have ended in round one, so he doesn't have a lot of experience competing in the octagon. Spivak is this kind of guy that, you know, if he manages to hurt Tybura with strikes, he is very likely to then try and take him down, or even though he does have an advantage striking, instead of trying to keep the fight standing, Spivak is this kind of guy that will kind of brain fat and try and take Tybura down. And if this fight goes to the ground in any capacity, Spivak is going to be in a lot of trouble. And one of the big reasons why I like Tybura in this fight is because irrespective of what Spivak can do standing, Marcin Tybura has a really nice deep double leg takedown entry. And if he could get Spivak to the ground early in this fight and get, you know, 2-3 minutes of top control, which should be pretty easy to do because Tybura's got a heavy top game, Spivak isn't that skilled on the ground, well, that is really going to zap Spivak's cardio, you know, early on in the fight, which means going into the second and third round, Spivak might not have the power in his hands anymore to actually make Tybura pay for his bad striking defense. So I do really like Tybura in this fight. You know, you look at the odds, I personally bet Tybura earlier on in the week at around 2.0. Couple of sites still have him at 2.0, but his odds have declined now. They're starting to correct. You know, at 2.0 for an implied probability of 50%, you know, those odds are plus 100. This is not a safe bet. Like, Spivak can absolutely go out there and knock Tybura out in like 10 seconds. Can 100% happen. Like, Tybura gets rocked, dropped, knocked out or wobbled in every single one of his matchups. But that's MMA, man, and it always surprises me how many people get so upset when, you know, a fighter that they bet actually has the audacity to get knocked out in an MMA contest to the death. It's like, would you go outside and complain that you got wet if it started raining? Well, no, you fucking wouldn't. That's the weather. So why would you complain when you bet on a cage fight and the fighter you bet on gets knocked out? It doesn't make any sense to me. That's the game we're playing. Yes, Tybura is susceptible to being knocked out, but the way I look at this fight, Spivak has a slight advantage striking, whereas Tybura has an enormous advantage when it comes to grappling and an enormous advantage when it comes to cardio. So an implied probability of 50%, it's undeniable that there's value here. You've got to cap Tybura at least 60%. And yes, this is a high risk bet, but at the end of the day, we're just digging for strong positions to put our money, and we're getting a nice 10% margin over the bookies from where they set the odds to what I personally capped this at. I don't understand why Spivak was the favourite. He shouldn't have been the favourite. The odds are slowly starting to correct now, with them flipping in favour of Tybura on many sites, and I'm sure that will continue in the run-up to this fight as more and more people have the time to actually dig into the footage and see that Spivak shouldn't be the favourite here. So what I would say to you guys, many of you don't like losing, many of you get, you know, really upset when you lose bets. I'm not going to hold your hand, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but in terms of mathematical value, Tybura is a decent bet this weekend. We now go on to the next fight that I want to talk about, which is going to be a really quick one. It is going to be Cruz against Spike Carlyle. And the reason why this is going to be a fast fight for me to get through is because there's barely any footage available on Spike Carlyle. Spike Carlyle is the alpha ginger. You will see him here in the red shorts. But this fight here against Matthew Colquhoun, or however you pronounce this, very sorry that I am butchering his name. But this fight here is pretty much the only footage that we've got to assess Carlyle on. And unfortunately, I'm going to be saying that on quite a few occasions in this video, because this card, UFC on ESPN Plus 27, does feature a lot of fighters who are debutants that we don't really have that much footage on. So we're kind of guessing how these fights are going to look this weekend. So it's impossible to form a strong opinion on this fight, because we literally only have this matchup to work on to assess what Spike Carlyle is bringing to the table. What I could tell you about Cruz is that he fights very long. He's got very nice kicks. He will have a big size advantage over Spike Carlyle. We see Cruz 6 foot tall with a 70-inch inch reach, absolutely massive for the division. You know, this fight will be contested at featherweight. This is a crazy wingspan for featherweight. I mean, you'd see heavyweights with this wingspan. I mean, if we look at the wingspan on, say, let's take a look at, who have we got? Let's take a look at Sergey Spivak. You know, he is only 6'3" with a 78-inch reach. We see Cruz fighting in the featherweight division with the same reach as him, not too much shorter either. So a crazy wingspan for the division, and Carlyle is only 5'7" with a 71-inch reach. So I mean, you know, that's going to be a giant 8-inch reach advantage for Cruz, and also a big size advantage, which will make it difficult for Cruz to get inside on him. But what I would say is, here we can see Carlyle coming in with a grappling heavy game plan. I don't know too much about Cruz's takedown offense and ground game, but what I would say is that guys who are abnormally tall for the division are usually pretty easy to take down, pretty weak off their back. There are unicorns, there are exceptions to the rule with guys like John Jones, guys like Montel Jackson, but they're few and far between. So as a general rule, Cruz probably won't have the best takedown defense at this stage in his career, and with Carlyle, you know, trying to come out and take Calhoun down, looks like this could be a striker versus grappler matchup. But Cruz, very much a kickboxer, fights long, nice snappy kicks. Not the best striking defense, but Carlyle doesn't look particularly dangerous standing anyway, so I'm not sure it would matter. And just another thing that I do want to mention in this fight is you now see, you know, we're only 2 minutes into this matchup, and Carlyle already looking very, very tired. You know, kind of shaking his arms out, bouncing around on his feet. So within 2 minutes, looking pretty tired here. And this fight only took place in August, which means you know, if he did come into this fight on a full camp, it's concerning how, you know, not that long ago, only going back sort of like 6 months, we saw him gas, you know, within 2 minutes, which isn't a good sign, because Cruz does have, you know, a pretty good gas tank for what from what I've seen. He was involved in a really competitive fight that, you know, went deep into the third round on the Contender Series. So, yeah, I mean, I trust Cruz's cardio based on what I've seen. But Carlyle, as you can see here, kind of bouncing around, shaking his arms out, taking some deep breaths. Wouldn't feel confident in this guy's cardio. So from a betting point of view, the current odds on Cruz are around about 1.56, which is minus 179 for an implied probability of 64%. So in order to get value here on Cruz, you've got to give him a better than 64% chance of winning. And if you look at the odds on Carlyle, he's currently around about an average of 2.50, which is plus 150 for an implied probability of 40%. So in order to get any value on Carlyle, you've got to give him a better than 40%. Based on this fight, I could definitely see why Cruz is the favourite. There's absolutely no doubt about that. You know, especially with Carlyle looking pretty tired after 2 months, after 2 minutes, but because there's not that much footage on him, it's just not enough for us to form a strong opinion. So there's no way I'd bet Carlyle because he doesn't look great here, but I also wouldn't bet Cruz as a big favourite either because we don't really know too much about his takedown defense or grappling. And I'll just skip to the head of this fight here because it does have a bit of a crazy ending before we go on to the next matchup. You see Carlyle get a crazy finish there with the spinning back fist, and Calhoun doesn't even really know what happened. We'll show you the replay because the replay is kind of crazy. If we get to it here, there we go, check this out. Carlyle, the alpha ginger, getting a big win off the spinning elbow. Boom, there he goes. Vicious shit. We now go on to the next fight that I want to talk about in today's video, which is going to be Zaira Fairn dos Santos against Felicia Spencer. And Fairn is in the black shorts here and the blue top. And I'm going to just leave this running in the background while I talk about this fight. I'm not going to spend too long on this fight because it's a little bit of a silly fight for betting, in my opinion. If we look at the odds, currently we've got Felicia Spencer around about an average of 1.13, which is minus 769 for an implied probability of 89%. So to get any value here, you've got to give Spencer a better than 89% chance of winning, which is very difficult, especially in MMA, women's MMA, when you take into consideration the fact that, you know, menstrual cycles can have an impact on the weight cut. You know, maybe Spencer's coming into this fight with an injury. You know, maybe she injures herself in the fight. You know, maybe she suffers from nerves and anxiety, which can affect her performance. Maybe she gets disqualified. Very, very difficult to cap a fighter having a better than 89% chance of winning a fight, especially when they're quite inexperienced, like Felicia Spencer at 7-1. If we look at the odds on Fairn, she's currently around about an average of 6.50, which is plus 550 for an implied probability of 15%. And if we just look at some X factors here, Spencer is 5'6" with a 68-inch reach. Fairn is 5'10" with a 73-inch reach. So Fairn will have a nice 5-inch reach advantage and a decent size advantage, but that could work against her in this fight because this is a classic striker versus grappler matchup where Spencer is the Spencer is the grappler, Fairn is the striker. And the problem is because Fairn's quite tall at 5'10" and Spencer's quite short at 5'6", that low center of gravity will actually make it easier for Spencer to get in deep on Fairn's hips and take her down. So Fairn doesn't have the best takedown defense, doesn't have a very high level ground game, and while Spencer isn't that great on the ground either, she's certainly enough to cause Fairn big problems on the ground. And as we saw in Spencer's last fight against Cyborg, she's tough as nails, man. You know, Fairn doesn't really have too much power in her hands. She's nowhere near as dangerous as Cyborg, so Spencer can survive against Cyborg. You guess Spencer can survive anything the Fairn throws at her standing, and Spencer is likely to dominate this fight on the ground. With Fairn's takedown offense not being great, her ground game not being great, this is an easy fight for Felicia Spencer. Problem is her odds reflect that, and Felicia Spencer is just not the kind of fighter that I would bet in that odds range, man. I mean, there are very few fighters I would touch in that odds range. Felicia Spencer's not one of them, but unfortunately at the same time I'm not seeing enough from Fairn to want to take a gamble on her either. This fight is an easy pass for me. We now go on to the next fight that I want to talk about, which is going to be Cutelaba against Magomed Ankalaev, one of the more interesting fights on the card. And earlier on I did say that Marcin Tybura was one of the first names that jumped out at me as a potential bet on this card, and one of the other names that jumped out at me as a potential bet was Magomed Ankalaev. I thought this guy would be a very, very good bet, you know, because from memory he was kind of better than Ion Cutelaba everywhere. Now, when I researched this fight, my initial suspicions were true. Ankalaev did turn out to be better than Cutelaba everywhere, but unfortunately I did notice some things in his fighting style which do concern me a little bit about betting Ankalaev here. Now, what I always say to people is you've got to let the odds do the work for you. So we will be heavily going off the odds when we talk about this fight, because from my perspective there's no doubt that Ankalaev should be favoured here, and Ankalaev has the best chance of winning. Ankalaev has a significant chance of winning, but his odds reflect that. You know, his current average odds are around about 1.47, carry an implied probability of 68%. That's moneyline odds of minus 213. So in order to get any value on Ankalaev, you've got to give him a better than 68% chance of winning. And if you look at the odds on Cutelaba, he's currently around about an average of, call it 2.75, which is plus 175 for an implied probability of 36%. Now, in order to get any value on Cutelaba here, you've got to be capping him at over 40%. And what I would say is, I've seen a lot of people out there that are interested in betting Cutelaba. I would tell you that I don't believe Cutelaba is a very good bet here. Can Cutelaba win? 100% he can win. But I think a big mistake that people make is when they think that an underdog can win, they automatically assume that there's value in the odds, but that's not the case. In order for there to be value in the odds on an underdog, you've still got to look at the implied probability on the odds and see if you're getting a margin over the bookie. This kind of odds range from 2.50 to 2.80, which is plus 150 to plus 180, it's like a really trappy odds range where the odds can be enticing. It can seem like you're getting a really good deal, but when you actually look at the implied probability, that's not the case. from my perspective, Ankalaev has advantages over Cutelaba everywhere. So while Cutelaba can win the fight, I cannot give Cutelaba a better than 40% chance of winning. In fact, it's a little bit of a stretch to give him a 40% chance of winning. So there is no value on Cutelaba here. I understand a lot of you are betting Cutelaba and you think he can win. And while I agree with you, I do think he can win. Unfortunately, there is no value in the odds. But I am with you in the sense that I do think Cutelaba can cause Ankalaev problems. So how can he cause Ankalaev problems? So let's look at this from a betting point of view. So there's no doubt that Ankalaev is the more technical striker. There's just no doubt about it. You know, Cutelaba is quite wild and raw, but he does hit very hard and he is aggressive and very dangerous, particularly early. And what I noticed about Ankalaev is that he doesn't have the best striking defense. He does get dinged a lot. If you go back and watch his fight against Dalcha Lungambula and also against Klidson Abreu, we can see that both guys landed bombs on him. In fact, Dalcha actually wobbled Ankalaev in round 1 and had Ankalaev backed up and hurt quite bad. The problem is Dalcha didn't really act on it. He kind of landed a bomb, wobbled Ankalaev and let him off the hook. He didn't really follow up. He gave Ankalaev an opportunity to recover. And that's significant in the context of this fight because I don't fully trust Ankalaev. In his fight against Paul Craig, he was 1 second away from winning. And he literally gave up the fastest tap to a triangle choke I have ever seen. I have been watching MMA for 15 years. Every week I watch 30 to 40 hours of fight footage. And I have never seen a fighter tap that fast to a triangle choke. All he had to do was hold on for a second and he would have won that fight. So this fight is a huge red flag for me because what this says to me is that if you put Ankalaev in a bad position, he's going to quit. And Cutelaba is definitely capable of putting Ankalaev in a bad position because Ankalaev is there to be hit. He's a very good technical striker, very, very good grappler, but his striking defense isn't great. He's a little bit slow. And my fear is where we've seen him get dinged by Abreu, dinged by Dalcha, but they kind of let him off the hook and let him recover. If Cutelaba hurts Ankalaev, we know what Cutelaba is like. He's wild, he's aggressive, he's going to go for the kill. If he wobbles Ankalaev or senses he's been hurt, he's going to go after him and pursue the finish. And earlier on, we were talking about the difference between Tybura and Spivak. You know, when both guys got hurt, we've seen Spivak turtle up and kind of look for a way out against Walt Harris, whereas we've seen Tybura, you know, fight through adversity and come back after being hurt. That's what you want to see a fighter do. With the way that Ankalaev tapped so fast against Paul Craig, I don't trust that this guy would fight out of a bad position if Cutelaba hurt him, and for that reason, it makes it very difficult for me to give him a better than 68% chance of winning, which I need in order to get value here. And another one of the reasons why I don't like a bet on Ankalaev here is because obviously one of Ian Cutelaba's biggest weaknesses is his takedown defense and ground game. Now in his defense, he has improved his takedown defense by an order of magnitude. This guy's takedown defense used to be really, really bad, but Cutelaba has clearly been working so hard over at Tiger Muay Thai because he's made giant strides to his takedown defense, and now, at least when he's got gas in the tank, he's pretty fucking difficult to take down. Cutelaba's one of these guys now that is difficult to take down, but if you do take him down and put him on his back, he is still, unfortunately, at this stage in his career, incredibly weak off his back. He has a very low level ground game. But again, it's fine. Like we were saying with Spivak earlier on, right? He's only 26 years old. He's got plenty of time to improve. And one day, Cutelaba is going to be an absolute monster. He just needs more time, man. Need to put him back in the oven and he'll be done one day. He'll be perfect. But for now, very, very weak on the ground. So if Ankalaev can get this fight to the ground, Cutelaba is going to be in a lot of trouble. The only issue is, like we said, Ian Cutelaba, at least early in the fight when he's got gas in the tank, very, very difficult to take down. And Ankalaev's offensive wrestling is not good, boys. All of Ankalaev's takedown entries come very, very high above his opponent's hips. There's not much drive on them. There's not much explosiveness. They're not even that well timed. I think Ankalaev is going to have a real difficult time taking Cutelaba down while Cutelaba's got gas in the tank. So I anticipate the first round of this fight to take place standing. And so long as this fight is standing with how easy Ankalaev is to hit, Cutelaba has a legit chance of winning. So with this fight, for me, I can't bet Ankalaev at these odds, but I also don't see any value on Cutelaba at all. This is an easy pass for me. The odds are roughly where they should be. So now if we go on to the next fight that I want to talk about in this video, it is going to be Megan Anderson against Norma Dumont, and I am sorry that we've had to do this on a couple of occasions already in this video with Spike Carlyle and Alan Cruz. But this is also a fight where it is impossible to form a strong opinion simply because there is barely any footage available on Norma Dumont. She is only 4-0, and this fight here against Erica Ledan, which took place, a very, very long time ago, 2.5 years ago. This fight, it only lasted 3.5 minutes, but this is pretty much the only footage we've got available on Norma Dumont to try and work out how she might do against Megan Anderson. Now, Dumont is in the white sports bra and grey shorts here. What I would say about this fight is, based on this fight, I think that Dumont might be a very, very difficult stylistic matchup for Megan Anderson, because we've seen in Anderson's past fights that she has very bad takedown defense and a very, very low level ground game. Now, if we take a quick look at the odds, at the moment Megan Anderson's odds are around about 1.44, which is minus 227 for an implied probability of 69%. In order to get value on Anderson here, you've got to give it a better than 69% chance of winning, which I can't do for all the reasons that I'm going to talk about in this video. If we look at Norma Dumont, her odds are currently around about an average of, call it 2.85, which is plus 185 for an implied probability of 35%. I think Norma Dumont might be a sleeper bet, one of the best bets on the card, but it is impossible for us to feel confident in that just because we don't have enough footage for us to form a strong opinion. But the reason why I think that Norma might be a very, very difficult matchup for Megan Anderson here is because in a little bit in this fight, you're going to see a little bit of Norma's ground game. Now, early on, you're seeing her stand up. As you can see, she's throwing, nice technical, powerful, snappy punches, decent kicks. It looks like she can hold her own when it comes to striking, and she's obviously going to need to because Megan Anderson, very, very dangerous striker. But the most impressive thing about Dumont in this fight for me as she gets this takedown here is that she appears to have very, very strong hips. When you look at her from top position here, when she obtains mount, she looks like she has a reasonably heavy top game, at least to the extent that she looks like she knows what she's doing on the ground. Whereas when you watch Megan Anderson, she's very, 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 very green on the ground. And we also have to bear in mind that, this was Dumont 2.5 years ago. She's probably going to have improved a hell of a lot since then. And if we think about it, you go back watching Megan Anderson's fight against Holly Holm. Holly Holm was easily able to take her down, easily able to control her from top position. And if Dumont has got any type of grappling, really, she's going to be able to cause Megan Anderson big problems. And of course, an important factor to take into consideration in this matchup is the size difference, right? Some people have said, I think Megan Anderson's a great bet here because of a huge size advantage. But what they don't understand is the size difference in a fight like this can actually work against Megan Anderson. Anderson's 6 foot tall with a 72-inch reach. Norma Dumont is only 5'7" with a 67-inch reach. So yes, Megan Anderson will have a huge size advantage, a huge 5-inch reach advantage. But again, like we said in the Felicia Spencer versus Zara Fairn fight, when you have a matchup like this where, potentially a striker versus grappler matchup where the striker is taller, the grappler is shorter, that lower center of gravity for the grappler will make it much easier for her to get in deep on the taller opponent's hips, upset their balance, drag them to the ground. So yes, usually having a size advantage over your opponent is going to be an advantage, but in specific stylistic matchups like this can actually be a disadvantage. And here we see, I know that the girl Norma, is fighting, is at a very low level. She looks very, very weak off her back. But this performance here from Norma, where she at least shows strong hips, some level of grappling, with this being 2.5 years ago, this suggests to me that this might actually be a very, very tough matchup for Megan Anderson this weekend. Because if Norma can get this fight to the ground, which she stands a very good chance of doing, because we know Anderson's takedown defense is very poor, Dumont has really got a great chance of winning this. So as we just wrap this clip up here, eventually she gets the arm under the chin for the rear naked choke. As we just wrap this up, there's only one more thing that I want to show you for this fight. So from a stylistic point of view, we don't know that much about Dumont, but we do know that this could be a very, very difficult matchup for Megan Anderson because of her takedown defense and ground game. I don't know how fighters do what they do, man. Like, genuinely, like, I wouldn't even have the courage to get into the octagon, let alone fight another person in my underwear to the death in front of millions of people, because that's ultimately what it is, man. MMA is a cage fight to the death until the time limit is up or the referee pulls you off your opponent. It's scary shit, and I just wouldn't be able to do it, man. I would faint. I wouldn't physically be able to get into the octagon. I'm too much of a pussy. So it is no surprise that the incredible athletes that do compete in MMA, it is no surprise that they suffer from bad nerves and anxiety. And I'm sure many more fighters than we realise actually have the problem of performing to their full potential on fight day due to nerves and anxiety, because it's fucking terrifying. And obviously we've got guys like Donald Cerrone who are quite open about it, but the majority of fighters aren't. And I spend a lot of time researching these fights, boys, and I can tell you one of the reasons why it's so hard to make money on pre-fight bets is because fighters underperform a massive percentage of the time. Pre-fight betting is like tap dancing in a minefield. It's very, very difficult. You never know what version of a fight you're going to get on Saturday night. Doesn't matter how much work you put in, doesn't matter how much you know about MMA, ultimately, you can only study their past fights and hope that they turn up and look like that on a Saturday night, and so often they don't. And I think a big part of it is nerves and anxiety that have an impact on fighters' performances. So when I am going to share this clip with you, I really don't want you to think that I'm taking a real hardline, capitalistic, horrible kind of approach to mental health, because that's not what I'm trying to do here. What I always say is, ultimately, I make a living from betting on MMA, and it is my job to try and make the best decision possible with all the information we have available. I have to try and use every single piece of information we have available. So this clip that I'm about to show you features Megan Anderson talking about, her battles with anxiety and mental health, and how it can affect her performances. So I don't want you to think that I'm kind of being really unsympathetic and ignorant to this. I take it really seriously. I feel bad for Megan. She's got bigger balls than I will ever have. I wouldn't be able to be an MMA fighter in the first place. But in the context of making money from MMA fights, being a professional gambler, the information within this clip is very important. So I'm going to play a few now, and then I'm going to express to you how I feel this impacts betting Megan Anderson this weekend and in all of her future fights. So let's hear what she's got to say.
I wanted to ask you, it's been a while since we talked. I wanted to ask you about the fight in Ottawa against Felicia Spencer. No, Rochester, excuse me. I was thinking Canadian. From what I understand, were you actually close to not doing that fight, like the day of or maybe the day before? Were you that anxious before the fight? That's the story that I heard. Is that accurate?
Yeah. And I don't like to say or like talk about it much because I don't want to take anything away from Felicia.
Sure.
I think she's an amazing person and she's an amazing athlete and she deserves all the success, and she got her, like, she was the better woman of the night. But yeah, like, I had a lot of like internal stuff that I was dealing with, and I remember like 8 weeks before, I was so burnt out and I had so many issues of my own that I hadn't dealt with from like my childhood and growing up and all that kind of stuff, that like I used to use that as fuel for my fighting, and I kind of got to a point where I was becoming okay with it. So like I didn't really know what I was fighting for anymore, and I was in like a position where like I just let everything get to me. And 10 a.m. on the Saturday of the fight, we were supposed to shake out with my coach James, and he was in my hotel room like, hey, like, we need to make a decision, like, do you want to do this or not?
You came to that.
Yeah.
And were you thinking not initially? Like, did he have to convince you?
He didn't really have to convince me, but he knows like the type of person I am. Like, I would never have been able to live with myself if I did, just because of like the type of person I am. Like, I signed on the dotted line. Like, no matter what is going on inside, like, I have a job to do, and my job is to go and to fight no matter what. Like, I put that shit aside and I'll deal with that afterwards, and we did that.
So were you having like a panic attack?
Yeah, kind
Okay.
of. Like, I deal with like a lot of like anxiety and stress and like depression. So it's kind of funny because like a lot of people are like, oh, well, like training and doing exercise helps like happy endorphins, all that kind of stuff. And yes, to a certain extent, but when like training twice a day, like hard every single day is your job, like you're trying to improve, you're trying to be competitive, you're trying to have like good rounds in the gym, you're trying to go out and fight, like those happy endorphins aren't really there because like it's a job. And I think like I started seeing a therapist and helping me with that, and because they weren't going to let me fight again after the Rochester fight until I had figured everything else out.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yeah.
Had you ever experienced that before, that close to a fight?
No.
Never. Why do you think it
Never.
happened then? Like, why do you think it all came to a head like that?
I am so hard on myself, and I felt because of where the division was that I had to win and I had to put on good performances and to keep the division alive. But really at the end of the day, like if they didn't want to have the division, like they wouldn't keep booking me fights. Like I can't, one person winning or losing isn't control of an entire division. Like that's not my call to make. And I think once I realized that, and I stopped putting so much pressure on my...
All right, guys. So shout out to Megan Anderson, man, for having the balls to talk about that on, on Ariel Helwani's podcast. She actually goes into like way darker stuff later on in the interview that I won't go into here. But she has had a rough life, man. So shout out to her for having the balls to talk about that on the podcast. But from our point of view, at least from my point of view, taking this very, very seriously, doing this for a living, you've got to, like I say, make the best decision possible with the information you've got available. And now knowing that Megan Anderson could have a serious panic attack before any of her future fights that would impair her performance, this now means that I can never cap Anderson as having a better than 50% chance of winning. I use this rule for any fighter that talks openly about this kind of stuff. So I use it for Donald Cerrone as well, because with fighters that suffer from this much anxiety before a fight, you never know whether they're going to show up or not. So it's always going to be 50-50 with them. So if we look at the odds on Anderson, she's currently around about, an average of 1.44, which is minus 227 for an implied probability of 69%. There is no way you can bet Anderson here at these odds, because in order to get any value, you'd have to give her a better than 69% chance of winning. And with her battles with mental health, it's always going to be 50-50 whether she shows up and performs with full potential or not. So I'm sure Anderson is going to bounce back hard. She's a fucking beast. I mean, she wouldn't have got this far unless she was incredibly resilient and a fucking beast. So I'm sure that she is going to beat these demons and eventually get that featherweight title, man. I feel like at only 30 years old, she's still got plenty of time to improve. One day she's going to get that belt, man. But it's a little bit of a concern betting her at favourite odds because you don't know if she's going to show up or not. So this fight is an easy pass for me because at these odds, Anderson's too steep to bet. And we don't know enough about Dumont to take a gamble on her at underdog odds. So that is how I feel about that fight. We now move on to the main event of the evening. It is Deiveson Figueiredo against Joseph Benavidez, and it is almost like the writing is on the wall, right? Benavidez has been in the probably the top 5 of the flyweight or bantamweight division for the last 10 years, dating all the way back to when he was fighting Dominic Cruz in WEC. And it is crazy that after 10 years, he now has probably the greatest opportunity of his career to hold UFC gold. Obviously, he's been involved in the title picture before. He's fought for a title before, but this is the first time where you look at it and you're like, you know what, man, this is a very winnable fight for Joe. And throughout this video, we've talked about, names that have jumped out at me as potential bets on this card with Ankalaev and Tybura. I do feel Tybura is a good bet at the current odds, even though it is very risky. I feel Ankalaev is a bad bet at the current odds. Benavidez is another name that jumped out at me as a potential bet, and we jumped right into researching this fight on Monday, man. Monday morning I woke up, saw Benavidez at odds of around 1.80, which is around about minus 125 for an implied probability of 56%, and I honestly felt like I must be missing something. I just couldn't understand why Benavidez and Figueiredo were close to even money. The odds just seemed way off to me, and Benavidez seemed like an incredible bet. So we jumped right into the research on Monday on my website. If you don't know, we have got this live stream section where we basically research every single UFC fight. I live stream pretty much every day of the week on there, and literally my members loved the bet on Joe Benavidez so much that we actually started to move the line while the live stream research session was taking place. So we hit him at about 1.80, and you can now see Benavidez's odds have declined quite a bit. They've actually started to recover on some sites, but on others like Bet365 they've got absolutely hammered. So I bet Benavidez Monday morning bright and early at 1.80 minus 125, and I honestly think that Joseph Benavidez is one of the best bets that I have seen in a long time. One of my favourite bets in a long time. This is a great matchup for Benavidez for lots and lots of reasons. And where do I start with this one? Because I've got a lot to say. All right. Okay, so this is a great stylistic matchup for Benavidez because on the most basic of levels, Deiveson Figueiredo has a very, very predictable style of fighting. And I don't mean that in the capacity of, attacking his opponents with the same attacks, the same kind of strikes, the same kind of takedowns. I don't mean predictable in that sense, but I mean predictable in terms of the pattern that he fights in. If you go back and watch Deiveson Figueiredo's fights, you'll see that this is a guy that very much fights in bursts. What he will do is he will attack his opponent with vicious, devastating power strikes or a huge explosive takedown. And then if he lands those power strikes, he will hope that he's hurt his opponent enough to put them into a defensive shell so that they won't attack him for 30 to 40 seconds so that he can then take his foot off the gas and recover. What you'll notice about Figueiredo is he repeats this pattern over and over again where he will just fight in bursts. So he will attack his opponent, retreat, reset, and recharge. Attack his opponent, recharge, reset. He's almost like a boss fight on a video game. On video games where boss fights have got these predictable patterns of attacks and you've got to learn these patterns and then you can start to kind of chip away at him when he's not attacking. That is the exact that is basically Figueiredo in a nutshell. He fights in bursts. And that's what makes this such a great stylistic matchup for Joseph Benavidez, because I'm just a geek that sits on his ass studying fight footage all day in some tiny corner of Wales, right? Joseph Benavidez is one of the best lighter-weight fighters of all time, man. One of the best flyweights of all time. He's a smart, intelligent guy. He will do his homework on Figueiredo, and if I can spot these patterns, you're damn fucking sure Benavidez can spot these patterns as well. And that makes this a great stylistic matchup for Benavidez, because if you go back and watch Figueiredo's fights against Pantoja, against Formiga, not so much against Formiga because obviously he got pretty much dominated on the ground, but if you go back and watch any of Figueiredo's fights, what you'll notice is because he hits so hard and because he is so aggressive when he launches these blitz attacks, he's very, very good at getting the respect of his opponent. Pantoja being the perfect example, where when he would attack Pantoja and hurt him, Pantoja would play the game of, also letting Figueiredo recover for 34 seconds, and then they both attack each other again in this blitz, because of course Pantoja's got bad cardio as well. Benavidez won't play that game. Benavidez likes to fight at a very high pace. There's no breaks with him. Benavidez has got the cardio to sprint and maintain a high output for the whole 25 minutes in this fight, whereas Figueiredo needs to pace himself, and he paces himself with that blitzing style. So what you see with Figueiredo is Figueiredo does slow down around about the midway point of the second round, bearing in mind this is a 5-round title fight. But he slows down midway through the second round against opponents that allow him to pace himself. Benavidez won't allow him to pace himself. In those 30-40 second breaks in between blitz attacks, where Figueiredo's used to having his opponent in a defensive shell so that he can catch his breath, Benavidez isn't going to play that game and let him recover. He's going to be all over him, blitzing him with combinations, blitzing him with leg kicks, forcing him to defend takedowns. And yes, Figueiredo does have decent takedown defense early in a fight, and Benavidez isn't the best offensive wrestler, but it really doesn't matter whether Benavidez gets the takedown or not early in a fight. All Benavidez has to do in this matchup is make Figueiredo work hard, exert energy, and that will pay dividends later on in the matchup. If this were a 3-round fight, I think the odds would be pretty accurate. But the fact that this is a 5-round title fight means there's tremendous value on Joseph Benavidez at the current odds, because there is no way that Figueiredo, at least based on his past performance, is going to be able to keep up with the pace that Benavidez sets. And before researching this fight, I felt that Benavidez might be a decent bet, but I thought, you know what, if it stays standing, Benavidez probably going to have some problem on his hands, because he's not the most technical striker. He doesn't have a crazy amount of power in his hands, although he certainly looks to have been developing power in his hands since his long layoff between 2016 and 2019. But Benavidez isn't crazy dangerous standing, so I actually thought, you know what, if it stays standing, I do give Figueiredo the advantage. After watching their past fights, I can actually tell you now, I give Benavidez the advantage standing. Because if you look at Figueiredo, his style of striking, he's very much a single shot striker, and he loads up a lot on his strikes. He's quite predictable, just looks to take your head off with big winging power hooks. And if you look at Figueiredo, you'll actually notice that his striking defense is very, very bad. He is there to be hit. Now, yes, Benavidez's striking defense isn't great either, but Benavidez will have a big speed advantage. And the difference is Figueiredo is throwing single shots out there, single power strikes looking to land a bomb, whereas Benavidez is throwing punches in bunches, combinations. He is just like a more complex puzzle to solve. You really don't know what Benavidez is going to attack you with when he comes forward, whereas Figueiredo is looking to load up with these big power hooks on on these blitz attacks that he likes to repeat over and over again. So when you look at this fight, it is just a great matchup for Joseph Benavidez everywhere. One of the only real threats that Figueiredo poses to Benavidez is obviously the risk of a knockout, right? Figueiredo's very aggressive, he hits very hard, but that could be said about every fight, right? like I said earlier on in the video with the Spivak and Tybura fight, if you are worried about losing bets because a fighter is going to get knocked out, this isn't for you. You shouldn't be betting on MMA. It's like complaining about getting wet when you go outside and it rains. It's just the game we play. So yes, Figueiredo does carry major power. He could knock Benavidez out. But we always have to ask ourselves, how likely is that? You know, if you look at Joseph Benavidez, he's had over 30 pro fights, and for the last 10 years, he has consistently been competing against the best fighters in the world in the bantamweight and flyweight division. And if you look at his record, he has only been finished one time in 33 pro fights, guys. One time in 33 pro fights against what some people consider to be the greatest fighter of all time. So yes, maybe Figueiredo can land a bomb and knock him out in round 1, but the same could be said about every fight. If you worry about shit like that, you shouldn't be betting on MMA, because it can happen in any matchup, right? It can happen in any matchup. There are no safe bets. But it's fair to say, with Benavidez only being KO'd one time in 33 fights against the greatest of all time, when he's consistently been competing against the best fighters in the lighter weight classes for the last 10 years, the chances of Davis and Figueiredo knocking him out are unlikely. Does Figueiredo hit hard? Yes. Is he dangerous? Yes. But he ain't crazy dangerous. And Benavidez is incredibly tough as well. Benavidez is the kind of guy that you're going to have to practically kill in order to finish. It won't be enough to wobble him or knock him down, because he's good at recovering fast and he's going to try and fight through any adversity you throw at him. When it comes to grappling, Benavidez will have a huge advantage over Figueiredo. Early in the fight, Figueiredo's pretty difficult to take down, but what you'll notice about Figueiredo is into the second and third rounds, does start to give up very, very weak takedowns, and at least early on in the fight, when he's got gas in the tank, he's very difficult to hold down, but as he starts to get tired, he becomes very, very weak off his back. So early in the fight, I do expect Benavidez to struggle to get him down and hold him down, but into the third, fourth and fifth rounds, it should be all Benavidez. He should dominate the fight on the ground. And another weakness of Figueiredo is that he often gives up easy takedowns, fishing for long shot submissions. He loves jumping on the guillotine and essentially pulling guard on guillotine attempts, which would be a huge mistake against Benavidez, who has excellent guillotine defense. And one more thing that I want to show you in the context of this fight, which might make sense of everything I've just said, is that Figueiredo always looks like death at the weigh-ins. Here you can see him weighing in for his UFC 240 fight against Alexandre Pantoja, and you can see that he always has to go to the scale, always has to go to the towel to make weight, always looks very, very rough on the scales, always looks like Skeletor, face very sucked in, always looking dehydrated. Now bear in mind, the weight limit for this fight would have been 126 pounds. The weight limit for this title fight will be 125 pounds. So that extra pound ain't going to be easy for Figueiredo to hit with how he looks here, and he always looks terrible like this at the weigh-ins. But this is the root cause for how much he slows down into the second and third round of his fights. And like I say, Benavidez is a guy with endless cardio. He can sprint and fight at a high pace for 25 minutes. Figueiredo is not going to be able to keep up with the pace that Benavidez sets over a 5-round fight. So Benavidez is an incredible bet this weekend, one of my favourite bets in a long, long time. If we look at the current average odds available on Benavidez at the moment, it's declined from where we bet him at 1.80 down to about 1.71. I still think there's a lot of value here, guys. I think these odds are way off. At 1.71 for an implied probability of 58%, that's moneyline odds of minus 141. There's just so much fucking value here. It is ridiculous. Because if you look at how this fight could play out, there's basically no way Figueiredo can win a decision. There's basically no way that he can out-grapple Benavidez or submit him. It's very unlikely that he could outstrike Benavidez. Literally his only chance of winning this fight is by first or second round knockout, which won't be easy because of how tough Benavidez is. And realistically, how likely is that when Benavidez has only been finished one time in 33 fights against the GOAT, Mighty Mouse? Not very likely. So I love everything about this bet on Benavidez this weekend. I think he's a great bet. But great bet doesn't mean an automatic bet, right? It always blows me away how when I come to you guys and I say, do you know what? this is an amazing bet for this reason, this reason, this reason, and this reason. It always blows me away when bets like this lose. People cry about it. So I am not going to hold your hand, boys. Do your own research on this one, but I will point you in the direction of the fight between Joseph Benavidez and Deiveson Figueiredo, because I can assure you from all my experience, Benavidez is an incredible bet. Yes, he can get knocked out in 30 seconds, but based on all the information we have available going into this matchup, Benavidez is one of the best bets in MMA in a long time. At these odds, he's an absolute steal. Hopefully he comes through for us this weekend. So that is going to be it for this video, boys. If you liked it, please hit the like button below, and also please leave a comment if you haven't already. And remember, if you want that video or you want that live stream this weekend where we go through all the fights on this card and try and find a decent prop bet for every single fight on the card and come up with some lottery ticket parlays, and I'll answer all your questions about the fights coming up this weekend, you know what to do. Hit the like button below. This video gets 300 likes. We will do that live stream a couple of hours before UFC on ESPN Plus 27 this weekend. So thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Have a great fucking Friday, and I will see you all very